All right, everyone. So thank you for joining us for our webinar. This is our inaugural webinar for BrainSmith, which is pretty exciting. And I'm really excited to talk to you about AI for health science educators. This is obviously a really big topic. And so as you'll come to discover, this is webinar one of a bunch of webinars that we're going to hopefully offer. This one is about foundational skills and mastering foundational skills. And so my good friend and colleague Carly is here with me to hang out with you tonight and talk about some good
Welcome to our
stuff.
AI in health science education.
So I thought maybe we'd start with this video. He jumped the gun a little bit on us, but we had big budget for this webinar, so we hired this actor and we rented out the theater. Not really. We just obviously used AI to make the video to welcome everybody to the webinar. So there you go. AI is a bunch of things. Tonight's going to be a lot about words and creating lessons and materials, but AI is doing some dramatic and fascinating things and rapidly multiplying in terms of its capabilities. And so video creation like this, where this dude looks pretty good. He's got maybe a weird knuckle, maybe, but I think he probably caught it in the door. But really the capabilities of video and multimedia AI is really advancing quite a bit. I made this with VO, you see as the engine there, and that is a Google product. So that's where that's come from. I just want to take you through what we're going to talk about tonight, and then we'll get into some intro. So we're going to kind of give the big picture about how AI is really kind of transforming everything, but our topic of the evening, health science education. We're going to talk about some core concepts that underscore AI, how it works, well, how we think it works. And then we'll get started on some demonstrations using some large language models and going through some examples about how we use AI. We're also going to talk a little bit about responsible use of AI in academic settings, which I know is a big topic. And in fact, will be a topic all by itself for a webinar in our future. So with that, I'll throw it over to Carly to introduce herself.
Well, hi everyone, and I want to echo Eric's big thank you for taking time out of your evening, whether you're just getting out of work here on the West Coast like me, or you're home and you're relaxing now. We appreciate your time. So I want to introduce myself, but I also want to introduce Eric a little bit. So Eric, you've already heard from a little bit. He has been in the teaching field for more than 20 years and now serves as the Curricular Innovation Director at the University of St. Augustine. So he's bringing a lot of knowledge into the room and also knows a lot about AI. And when he first approached me about doing this as our first webinar, I was like, oh no, I don't know as much about AI as you do. So I'm actually here as your moderator and your AI layperson, but I do actually know a few things that have been helpful, and I'm going to share that with you, how I use my AI in my day-to-day. I am an adjunct professor at USC, and so I do use AI to help me kind of get through the demands of my faculty position. And I use it a little bit for content creation as well for BrainSmith, which is sort of fun. So that is a little bit about the two of us. And we together make the team at BrainSmith and are excited to bring you a little bit more information in this webinar so that you feel more empowered about AI. And I would love actually just to have a better sense of how comfortable people are and what people are doing currently. Just drop in the chat. When I am we're talking about the using AI in health sciences education, what does that bring up for you? What are the feelings? How do you feel? Because I personally felt and feel like I'm always behind. I never quite feel like I know exactly what to do or like what's the best way. Am I doing this the most efficiently? So I feel like I'm always behind. And that's why I'm really excited to be partnered with Eric here, because he is a little ahead of the curve, I think, and can point me in the right direction.
Thanks. With AI, I'm not sure anybody's actually ahead of the curve, but so I'll join you in the feeling of behind. So maybe I just have more of a nerdy vocabulary about it. So there's that. But yeah, I think that's great. Please tell us in the chat how you're feeling about AI, or as we're going through, if you have specific questions that you want us to hit on as we go. As we get later on in our presentation, we'll obviously have some time for question and answers too. So all that put together will be a good time. So I hope tonight's informative, and I hope you get to see some cool examples. All right, cool. Thanks. I see some chats coming in. That's fantastic. So, I think everybody is probably here because you understand that AI is completely transformative. It's interesting if you study the history of AI, there's always been what they call AI summers and AI winters. And the summers where a new AI product would drop and people would get very excited about it. And then, it wouldn't really do everything it was cracked up to be. And it would kind of go away and people would lose it. And there wouldn't be a new advance in AI for a long time. But this one's a little different. This one might have some staying power because for the first time ever, the ability of some of these models are surpassing human ability at some of them. Not all of them. That would be something that they call general AI intelligence. And we're not there yet, but we're making progress there. Some models, like large language models, can outperform humans in some tasks. So, we think broadly, AI is about content creation. So, if we're thinking about education, it can generate our materials really quickly, but we still need to be there to help it, to guide it. It can help us transform how we communicate with students. It can help us make social media content, software development. It's actually really revolutionizing software development in the sense that there's this thing called vibe coding. And if you use a certain platform and you just kind of speak what you want the program to do, AI is smart enough to know the code to get it to do the things. And so without knowing any programming language, people are creating apps and doing software development like that, which is really kind of amazing and maybe elevates everybody to be sort of their own software engineer, which is a little scary and also really exciting. With research and legal things, even compliance, I might even expand legal to say accreditation. AI is really helpful to do reviews, accelerate how you're synthesizing different concepts. So, I think it's, obviously all over the place and really something that is going to change our lives in many ways, some probably for the better, some maybe not for the better. I'm always reminded when I talk about a real classic novel that I really love, which is Kurt Vonnegut's Player Piano. And so if you ever are in a mood to read some Kurt Vonnegut, he maybe knew more about this moment in our lives than he thought of. So, I see a few people here are some brand new people at AI. So that's great. I would also encourage you, if you are brand new and we're talking through and you're hearing lingo, put it in the chat. Have us define the lingo. Don't let us go on without bringing you with us. So the first thing I want to tell you about AI, and this is especially important for people who are beginners, is that AI isn't centered around truth. All right. The way AI works is it is a prediction engine, at least these large language models. And because it's a prediction engine, what it's doing is it's analyzing huge sources of information and predicting what the next best word is to match whatever query you've given to the system. And it seems like that wouldn't work, right? It just seems hard to imagine that it's predicting stuff. Because when you use these programs and you interact with them, they're so smart. They feel like there's a person there. They feel like you're interacting with something intelligent. And especially when you have it iterate stuff or change little things about what you're doing, it's kind of a back and forth with this system. But you always need to keep in your mind that it's based on a prediction model for what the next best word is, not the absolute truth. And so a good example of that is if I wanted to look up what the hours are of a restaurant near my house, I might still use Google search to go onto the web and find Google's truth information about when that restaurant is open versus going to AI and doing a search that way. AI would just be predicting things. It would be trying to answer it for me and it would probably honestly make stuff up. And when it makes stuff up, there's a word for it. We call it hallucinations. And every AI program that you look at will have somewhere on the screen, it'll say, if you're thinking about Claude, it'll say Claude makes mistakes, check the information. Or Gemini makes mistakes, check your information. And that's really important because at any given time, AI can give you a hallucination, give you something completely wrong, and act like it's really true. And that's a little weird. So you need to be there for the ride. I think, a term people call is keeping the human in the loop. Another kind of example of AI giving a hallucination is a few weeks ago, I had a fish that got sick. I have a pond with some koi fish and I wanted to give it salt into the pond. That's a helpful drug, salt, just adding salt to the koi pond. And I wanted to know the right concentration of salt to add. So I went on to AI. I had previously had this conversation with ChatGPT. And I asked it to remind me. I said, my koi pond is this big. I want to add salt so I can treat this thing. How much should I add? And it gave me a number that just didn't feel right. It felt really, really small. I remember previously it telling me 175 pounds. And I looked it up and I did the math, and sure enough, it seemed like too much salt, but that was how much I needed. So this time it said, like 40 pounds. And I was like, well, that seems a lot different than the last time. So I asked it to justify its information and check it. And it did. It checked it and it gave it to me. And we went down this rabbit hole of it insisting that it was right until it got to the point that it said, this is right because point one is much larger than point four. And there's a known thing with decimals. It has a hard time with decimals. And so then I told it it was wrong. And it was like, oh, you're right. I was wrong the whole time. So, I was trying to administer a medication to these fish. And thankfully, I had that previous knowledge, that foundational knowledge in my head. Otherwise, I might not have known that that was a wrong information. And so I think that's one of the things I think about with students is that, yeah, use AI as like a facilitator, but you really need to always kind of build that foundational knowledge so you have the tools to be able to judge when it's hallucinating or not. There's some other challenges related to AI. And so I see somebody in the chat there talking a little bit about Daniel, about the environmental considerations that's down there. That's something that I think about all the time. AIs have a huge environmental impact. AI is changing the workforce. Maybe we've all at this point seen some like deep fakes, some AI videos that completely seem true and they're not at all. Some of those come out from really high levels of government and companies, and it really undermines trust in information and research and in society, really. This environmental impact is a really interesting thing. So, right now in the US, there's almost no regulations on AI. But AI systems are incredibly energy intensive. It takes tons and tons of energy to train these models to basically download or upload the internet into this system. And then the server farms that AI uses are huge and consume large amounts of information and energy. How much energy? We have no idea because there's no regulations that say they have to tell us. As these things consume energy, they get really hot, so they need a lot of water to cool them down. That's the most efficient way to cool them down. So we don't really know how much energy is being consumed by AI. We don't know how much water is being consumed by AI. There was a recent estimate that said by sometime this year, AI use would account for more global energy use than the country of Japan. So it's significant. If you look in news recently, you'll find articles that say Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they all own nuclear power plants now. So at least they're trying to make clean energy, but they also own a lot of coal plants too, coal plants that were destined to be decommissioned. So, the environmental impact of AI is something to pay attention to. So concerns aside, I think how do we best use AI? What's the pathway? How do we think through this lens? And, I think I try to envision it as a partner in my work, much the way that maybe a long time ago, a laptop might be a partner in your work, and laptops came out and you could do cool things and you could edit Word documents and print things really easily. It's not that different from that as in terms of like an augmenting technology. I don't think AI is built to replace your knowledge. I don't think it's built to create things that you couldn't create on your own, but it is built in a way to help you do that extremely efficiently. I think the creativity that you bring to it is important. And then AI can take that and leverage that even more. It can give you some ideas. It can help give you perspectives that you might not have had. And it really is plugged into so much information. And so I think it can help you identify gaps in resources and improve things that you might not do on your own, or maybe you could do, but it would be so labor intensive for you to do, you wouldn't do it. So I think those are some things that I think about AI as sort of this partner in your work. And it's not just for creating content. I use AI almost on an ongoing basis. And I think that's one of the ways that Carly is important here in this presentation, because I know she uses it kind of on an ongoing basis as well.
Yeah, and I will say the way that I use it, I'll show you in my demo how I use it when I think about my teaching, but I also am using it for efficiency in the form of content creation and also in my conversations with students, right? So thinking about what Eric was mentioning, how students sometimes they use it more like a search engine. And so that's a conversation that I might have with my students that, ChatGPT is not a search engine. It's more like a collaborator, right? It's like a coworker or a colleague that you can work together, but you have to kind of have the same level of knowledge, at least in terms of that background. And I Also, I wanted to point out there are a few sort of telltale signs of AI, which we'll get into a little bit later. But if you're noticing in your students that content's coming back and you're like, wow, there are a lot of emojis in this response, or there's M dashes, there's very certain predictable ways in which AI will report things back. So that's also something that as even someone who isn't going to use AI a lot, if you're deciding that it maybe you don't want to use it that much, you should recognize it so that when content's coming in and students are like sending things into you, you can recognize what's been done with AI and what has not. Because a lot of us will have course policies related to AI, but it's important to also have an additional conversation with your students just so you can be prepared for things that they're sending in.
Yeah, great. I think it's ubiquitous, and I saw one of the chat comments in here was like, "I'm excited about AI, and maybe I'm excited about learning. I'm not sure which, but I'm also concerned." Hopefully, you're concerned about AI, not concerned about us presenting it to you. But AI is concerning in a lot of ways because it allows people to plagiarize really easily. It can create content for people and skip parts of the learning process. But I think that's a little bit of a pessimistic way to look at it. There's another way to look at it, which is this is replacing some of that rote task stuff that we have had to do for a long time. And so maybe this is going to improve and accelerate the way we learn versus take away things about our learning. And that's all about how we want to approach it and interact with it and set ground rules for how we work with it in our society and in higher education. So when we say AI or generative AI, there's a bunch of different terms here, and we just want to get them straight. So the concept of artificial intelligence has been around for a very long time, since the 40s, I think. And since then, people have been trying to create systems that mimic human thinking and decision making. And part of that attempt involved creating machine learning. And machine learning is simply a system that tries to mimic human thinking that's trained on patterns of data. One of my favorite examples of a machine learning algorithm that has been around for so long is the machine learning that lives on phone lines since the 1950s that helps reduce echoes when you talk on the phone. You don't hear the transmissions happening in the lines, even though it's something that's there. The AI cancels it out. It's like noise canceling on the phone lines that you just don't even know is there. AI has been doing that for a long time. Generative AI is the new thing, and that's the thing that is creating new content, texts, images, videos. So generative AI is a small portion of the larger field of artificial intelligence. We're able to get to this new generative AI space because computer processors have gotten so fast. They're finally fast enough that it makes efficient sense for AI to be trained on such large data models that it can return the questions we ask it in a reasonable amount of time. So if you're saying why now, I think why now has a lot to do with computer processing power and some other economic factors. The science that has kind of lived that supports this has been around for a long time, but it was just it was waiting for somebody to put it all together with the right computer processing power. This is just a graphical interface. I found this image, a writer that writes a lot about technology and AI, Jeff Winter. This was on his website, and I thought it did a great job of graphically explaining all these terms related to artificial intelligence. And you see right in the middle there, we have ChatGPT. And of course, that's just one example. We're going to show you some ChatGPT tonight. We'll also show you some other transformer-based models. And so that's what the PT is in there. It means transformer. It's not important that you know that at all, but I think understanding that generative AI is just one component of this broader field of machine learning and artificial intelligence is probably helpful to know. All right. So here's one of the problems with AI. It's that we have this black box problem. And what that means is that nobody really knows how AI works. We sort of, I have this analogy about this, which is it's almost like somebody created a wheel for a car and then gave you the wheel and you used the wheel, but then nobody knew how they made the wheel. Like it just magically appeared. It seems like silly that we could have created something that we don't know how it works, but we really don't know how it works. It makes these predictions in ways that are unclear to us. As a matter of fact, a few months ago on my podcast, I had a gentleman on who was studying how AI works for his PhD at MIT. So that's a new degree you can take now, which is how does AI work? That's a doctoral degree at MIT, which is just kind of mind blowing that we could have this technology and yet not understand how it works. And it's just an interesting thing, but it's part of how these computers are processing information so quickly. And so there's a term called XAI, which stands for the explainable AI. And this is something that computer scientists are working on all over the place, trying to get more explainability in the system. This might in the future be some sort of regulation related to AI in terms of the fact that when you're using it for health decisions and diagnosis or education or legal standards, you sometimes probably need to know how it's coming to the decisions that it's coming on. One of the things that AI is kind of renowned for is that, we've trained it on the internet, right? That's essentially what it's trained on. Think of the entire internet, whatever is there, and put it up onto AI. And so when you ask AI questions, that's its resource that it has to draw information from. Well, if your opinion of the internet and all of the stuff that you're likely to find on the internet is similar to mine, there's probably some good stuff, but there's probably more scary, weird stuff on there. And so, if you assume that society operates with some degree of bias, that health science and research, the body of literature, has it cooked into it some degree of bias against certain groups or perspectives that are more pervasive than others, all of that is going to be automatically cooked into the responses that AI gives you. And so it can, in many instances, exacerbate and accelerate bias and, unfair practices more than we would on our own, just because that's what it's trained on. And if we were able to train it on a utopic data set, well, then that would be different, but we don't have that ability. So this, black box problem is something that's significant and honestly really fascinating to me. I tend to practically not pay attention to that. Sometimes I'll ask AI to tell me how it decided something or use a justification, but it's tricking me. I still don't really know how it works. It's just doing it, but it's giving me at least a reason for why it thinks it made the decision that it made. So, I think AI workflow, if I was to try to guide how to think about it, it would be more with this holistic mindset. It's not just to do one thing in your life. It's not just like, okay, well, I can use AI to write a test question and that's it. I think AI can hit all of these different stages of creation. So from helping you with ideas to creating the content, to validating the accuracy or iterating things, reviewing outputs. It can help you distribute, come up with strategies for sharing or disseminating information, and also like look at the impact of what you're doing. So you can use it for data analysis, which is really great. So if I pick any one of these stages here, I can think of a way that AI has helped me just this week. So for one, I'll pick verification. I was having an individual create like kind of like a script, like a plan, a studio plan to create skill videos for somebody. And so they were making this big skill video, but it's important that this person writing it was doing it in a way that was going to synchronize with how the class that was going to use the video was going to use it. And so they were different people, right? The director of that course, the instructor of that course was one person. The person making the videos that were planning how to film the technique, different person. And they made a lot of them, right? So there was like 30 or 40 technique videos. And this instructor, of course, like all of us, very busy. And we send them an email and there's like, well, I don't really have time to review 40 of these things that each one is like 5 or 6 pages long. So we used AI and we told AI to kind of check it for alignment and to verify that it was consistent with the textbook resource that they used. And so it went through, made comments on every single document that we had and facilitated it. And so then the review could be checking the output and making edits, not necessarily having to read through all of those pages. So that's just like one example from this week where AI used, helped me with some step in this creation process. Carly, what's one that you did this week that you want to share?
Ooh, drafting content creation. So that is one thing that thinking about how I'm trying to prepare for an upcoming semester. When you flag those things from a previous semester that you're like, okay, this activity didn't work quite as well as I wanted it to, and I need to iterate. And I'm prepping for the spring term now. So I was looking to see, okay, what can I look back and see? What were my notes for iteration? And so then what I did is I use ChatGPT the most, just because that's what I'm most familiar with. So I used ChatGPT. I was like, these are the learning objectives for this particular week, and this is the activity we did. This was the problem with the activity. Help me design a new activity that accomplishes the same learning objectives, but maybe provides a different framework. And then I asked it to give me a couple of options that I could then look at and say, do I like this, or is this like, would this work? And then, then I've taken one and I'm starting to kind of, add my own touch to that and adapt it so that it fits a little better with, the flow of the class. But it really helped me kind of, especially when you feel like you're spinning your wheels a little bit. It was very helpful to me to just like get some ideas out there. So that's how I like it as a collaborator, where I can kind of bounce ideas off of it, I guess, and then take what is useful and edit it further.
Yeah, great. So, I think the take home for this is to be creative about how you think about using AI. And I know if you're new at it, you're sort of like, well, I'm not quite sure where to start, but hopefully we'll give you some tools tonight to start to practice with some certain things and go there. The other thing I want to say, especially as we're talking to a room full of probably educators here, is that good teaching pedagogy is going to transcend tools or transcend settings, right? And so trust your ability as an educator to make decisions about how good the content is you're getting, or to devise creative ways to use things. I noticed that in a given room, if, some people have a lot of experience with education and some people don't have much, the people with that good educational background and that strong foundation, they're able to come up with ways to make AI do things that are more creative and more based in sound learning science than people without that. And so, trust yourself that you are a pretty smart human and you're still probably smarter than AI for a while. So, I think don't be afraid of it. Just understand that you have a lot of skills, and it takes a little, trial and error to find where your skills are going to intersect with this new technology. We're talking a lot about where AI came from. I want to give you just a list of new terms in case you see these. They're more, kind of lingo about AI, but it also is like, where is AI going? So, from 2000, it was, I think, November of 2022 is when ChatGPT launched their first public model. 2023 was full of, Google releasing, Facebook releasing, or Meta, whatever you want to call it. And, one after the other, Claude, all these things came out. And then last year was all of these models iterating tremendously quickly. So now we are into the stage of like, okay, well, what's coming next? So here are some things coming next. One is agentic AI. So that's a classy word or fancy nerdy word, I don't know, however you want to call it, for getting an AI to do tasks and steps for you. So you could think of like an agent of an AI being able to manage your calendar, right? So it would like understand an email, take a calendar event from that email, go to your calendar, do the task, and maybe even in a really smart way, it's going to like reserve an Uber for you to get to the airport because it knows that you need that to go to the airport. It might even check in for your flight. I don't know, whatever you could imagine an agentic AI could do. That's something that people are working on now. And there are different aspects of how agentic AI can be, and different companies offer different levels of integration with this. By the way, just another sidebar for people who are new with AI. It's easy to get lost in people advertising AI products to you. So you can search for like, what's an AI that does this? And you'll find 75,000 products that do it now. There are some that are better than others. And through the course of this webinar series, we're going to review some of them. But for the large part, all of these other products rely on the main engines of AI, which is ChatGPT, right? Because there's not 70 AI systems worth of data centers in the country. There's like 4 or 3, and they all use the same thing. So you might find this very fancy thing that says it's going to make it. You could make that same ebook content through ChatGPT, because that's really the engine that it's using. Now, as we're getting into more multimodal AI, we're getting AIs that are a little bit better. They're more fine-tuned to deal with audio, visual, images, a video, for example. You saw the stranger that kind of came on and introduced our webinar. Those things didn't exist 6 months ago, but they exist now. And so there are some AI tools that are going to get better and better at managing this multimodal AI. Small language models, well, that's seems a little bit weird that that would come after large language models, but it's really kind of makes sense when you think about little closed systems where we want a very specialized AI to make sure that our data is safe, right? So you might want to use ChatGPT for like broad content creation, but if you want to use an AI to analyze some of your practice trends, well, now data privacy is really important. You don't want necessarily that AI mixing with the general web and taking the things that you enter into it and just kind of owning that data, which some of them do. So small language models are these specialized trained AIs. You basically buy your own little supercomputer now. And you have a computer specialist, or maybe you're really good at vibe coding and you figure out how to run or deploy your own small language model, which is basically AI trained on a really specific data set. This is somewhat similar to RAG technology, and what that is stands for is retrieval augmented generation. And so this is again specialized AI, and you can see that the I use the exact same definition for both of these things. They're that similar in my mind, at least. But retrieval augmented generation is basically you give it a set of tools that you allow it to go get information from. Another example of that, where it's not super specialized and blocked out from data privacy, but is the way that the Google Gemini works. So Google Gemini will kind of seamlessly search the web if it needs to. So if you ask it something and it's the thing that you've asked it is not contained in its general database, it's smart enough to go outside of the general database and search a website that maybe you have pointed it to. And in fact, I'll show you an example of that a little bit later. This reminds me of one other thing to pay attention to. Because AI models require training, they all have a training date, right? And you can learn what that training date is. You can ask the AI and say, when was your last training? And it will say, I know things up to April 1st, 2025. That was the last time I was trained. So anything that happened after that, it has literally no idea, right? So say the moon disappeared 2 weeks ago. No AIs would know about it. They just wouldn't be able to talk about it because they weren't trained on it. So that training date is another thing to pay attention to when you're trying to create content and you might be concerned with current events. This is another slide that digs into that small language model because I think it's really important in health sciences and like where you could use small language models. This is, jumping a few steps ahead of basics and foundations, but I think it's important to keep in mind like how innovative it could be once small language models start to pervade into our lives. So, intelligent documentation in the clinic, care plan recommendations really specific for the patients in front of you, really talking about personalized lesson plans. I can think about how good AI can eventually get to help students analyze their test performance and prepare for the NPTE. Like right now, there's people that make whole careers out of doing this for different people, but AI is coming for them. If you're talking about research, well, that would make a lot of sense because you don't want your research labs data going all over the place. So small language model would make a lot of sense to help a research lab out as well. So keep your eyes open for small language model advancements. All right. So back to this and kind of shifting more towards our kind of show and tell stage here. What things can large language models create? Well, almost anything is the real answer, but let's try to narrow that down a little bit and show you some ways that it can create some things. So one thing it could create really easily would be really complex or simple patient cases. Another one would be assessment questions. It can create an assessment question on a PDF. You can upload lecture slides and it'll create questions from it. You can create assignments, and those assignments might be something you never would have thought of on your own. One of the key things that we're going to show you is how to refine and modify the AI outputs that you get, right? So whatever you type into AI, it's very rarely the thing that you want. Iteration is important, reprocessing, asking it a different way, further defining the prompt that you put in. And again, a terminology thing for the newbies. If we say prompt or prompt engineering, basically that's all it is the thing that we're typing into AI to get it to do the thing it wants to do. Carly, I mean, what's something not on this list that you've had AI create in terms of education?
Great question. So, thinking about actually, I've used it to draft emails back to students. So, the night before an exam, I say maybe to my own um, creating my own problem. I tell students I'll check emails up until 9 p.m. The night before an exam. And then, of course, at 8:45, you get an email with all of these questions. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be up for so long. And so what you can do is take the student question and load up, like take your lecture, especially if it's on content from your lecture, right? Put in some of your lecture notes and say, the student asked me this question, use these notes to craft a response. And and then I'll edit it and refine and make it, and turn it into my voice, so that it's not just the ChatGPT voice, because it has a particular way of speaking, which you can also adapt. Also, I will tell you that you can kind of change the output so it sounds more like you, and I've done that over time. But that saves me a lot of time, especially when there's a little bit of a time crunch involved. So that's one way that I like to use it to kind of help me draft nice responses back to students.
Yeah, if I was someone who ever got crabby, I could use AI to make myself sound more kind when I'm feeling crabby, but I would never be a crabby person. As we get into our examples, I think there's a few things you want to keep in mind to avoid making some mistakes. One of them is to not be critical, right? So don't trust them without checking and verifying, right? So you want to create, you want to like scan it, you want to review it, you want to keep the human in the loop and understand that your core knowledge is important. So everything you get, you kind of have to look at it with a critical eye. This is harder than you think. It might make a lot of sense to you, but I've gotten stuff not just from students, but from other professional academics that have clearly not gone through this step. And so what I want to say is it's so fast that it's easy to forget this step. Don't forget that step. Recognize that AI has bias. You can ask it specifically about the ways that it has bias. I once gave another presentation where I asked AI, like, what are the ways that there could be bias and how could I get rid of them? And it gave me this great thing, but you could tell that AI was like designed to make you love it, right? It kind of overlooked some of the biggest biases that is inherent in AI just because it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And AI is also, they're products from companies. So they're designed to keep you interacting with them and to make it seem like they're the best thing in the whole universe. So buyer user beware, right? I think in terms of education, creating content that doesn't align with objectives. It sounds so basic, but again, you can create so much so fast. Just don't be creative for creative's sake. Make sure that you're doing something that aligns with the AIs. And then the final thing would be like, use the right AI. And we can say that in terms of a couple different things. One, you want to use the AI with the capabilities that you need it for. We're going to show you ChatGPT. We're going to show you Anthropic's Claude AI. We're going to show you Google Gemini tonight. And they all have slightly different capabilities. But I also could mean use the AI that you have permission to use, right? So universities all have their own sort of policies about what AI they're allowed to use or they own. So if you have a MS 365 system, they might say, well, you're authorized to use Copilot, which is theirs. Other ones feel like you can use in this instance that or this. So make sure that whatever organization you're associated with might have some rules or privacy guidelines or AI guidelines that you need to pay attention to. And then privacy. Certain AIs will not transfer your data to their training. Other AI models very clearly say, yep, whatever you type in here, we know, and we know it forever. So that's a thing to pay attention with as well. All right. So we're going to go through 3 development examples, and I'm going to have Carly start us off. And I think she's going to start us off with developing some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so she can share her screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. So I will share in a moment, but first I want to take you into my perspective here as someone who teaches pharmacology and classes on Monday, and I give exit tickets to help prep me for office hours, which is on Wednesday. So in my exit tickets, I will find out what are challenging concepts that students want to review. And then in office hours, because I like to give students lots of retrieval practice, I like to give them little sort of low stakes, exam like, lightly timed simulations so that they can have practice questions. And we always know students always want more practice questions. So I want to give those to them. But to get that information on Monday and then have good questions ready with explanations for Wednesday, that creates a little bit of a time crunch. So this is one way that I like to use ChatGPT. And so that's one thing that's on my mind, first of all, thinking about questions to help. The other thing to know about pharmacology is that it was identified as an area of curricular weakness, right, in the Shield benchmarking paper in 2018. So I know that students have a hard time taking the content learned in class and in school and actually applying it in the clinical setting. So that's another thing in the back of my mind when I'm thinking about developing good questions that are going to help my students have a long-term retention. So let me share and we'll talk through a little bit about what I'm going to do. So let me see here if it'll let me pick my screen. There we go. So hopefully you all can see that now. And there we go. Now it's up. Sorry for the lag. My computer is old. So now we have ChatGPT up. And so the first thing that I like to think about is the specificity of my prompt. And I'm going to show you what happens when you don't get super specific with your prompt, the output you get. So I have pre-planned a question just to save us all time if you don't have to watch me type. But let's say my students said in their exit ticket, they're having trouble figuring out the difference between an ACE inhibitor and angiotensin receptor blocker. And if in this very moment you also were feeling that way, like, ooh, I actually don't remember ACE inhibitor versus angiotensin receptor blocker, we'll all learn together right now. But so then maybe I want some multiple choice questions. So that's what I'm going to ask ChatGPT for. So I'm going to put it in, asking it to write 5 multiple choice questions that help students understand the difference between ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers. So that's ultimately what I want, big picture. So let's see how it does when I just give it that prompt. Okay. So one thing that I kind of like that ChatGPT does sometimes is it gives you the category of the question, right? And so this has given me 5 different questions. And if we look at some of these questions, they're not bad, but they're maybe not quite as specific to what I want an entry-level doctor of physical therapy student to know. And sometimes ChatGPT will spit out something that maybe that content isn't in your course, right? Maybe it's a level of detail that's just too specific or it isn't quite right. So the one thing that I might do next is refine this. And there are a few ways you can do that. Some folks like to kind of edit. You can edit your initial prompt. Others like to enter a new one to kind of see the iterations and changes. I'm going to edit my prompt for you. But what I'm going to add in this time is I mentioned specificity. So I'm going to ask it, I want questions for doctor of physical therapy students to review during office hours. I'm going to explain the problem. They're confused about the distinction. And then I'm going to ask them to write multiple choice questions in the style of the NPTE exam, right? I can make it that specific. And then what I will also do, because I know they have problems with application, I want more than just recall questions. I want questions from higher up in Bloom's taxonomy. So I'm going to add that in, saying, give me a question for every level of Bloom. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to feed it some of the lecture transcript, the content that I know that they have watched, or lecture notes that they have, so they know what is coming. So I'm going to put all of that into ChatGPT and let's see what our output looks like. I'm just trying to highlight all of that content right now. Once I do that with my slow computer, I'll put that all in. And then I will show you what the output looks like. And the other thing I did not do was I did not add in my learning objectives. But this is where if you wanted questions matched to learning objectives, you could also put those into ChatGPT. So see, I've edited. I'm going to click send, and let's see how it does this time. So again, it's giving me some output, and then I, as the professor here, I'm going to go through these questions and see, do I like these questions? And so, for example, if we look at the first one, remembering, we have lisinopril, which is an ACE inhibitor, and we do ask them to recognize the suffixes. So I'm like, okay, I like this one. This is a good one. And then as we go further up to some of the more application patient case style questions, I can decide, are there any extra things I need to add into the STEM to make it a better fit for office hours? But you can kind of see how this very quickly helps me generate, in the span of like 2 minutes, I can have some pretty specific questions based upon the output from an exit ticket. So this is something that I really like to use when I am trying to come up with questions. It also is helpful if you want to come up with a question bank, right? Maybe you want to have 10 questions on a particular topic so that you might decide what you want to put on the exam if a particular question performed poorly. So it's a really quick way to do that. And if you test ChatGPT and they are kind of use the chat in advance to put in what your learning objectives are for that particular lecture, then you can ask ChatGPT to map the questions to your learning objectives as well. So it's just saving you a little bit of time and really having some nice curricular threads.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Carly. I think, one of the things I do too is like I'll prompt it to, especially in like an office hours set of questions, like give the rationales for why it's the right answer or why it's the wrong answer. And, I remember back in the day, we were making content for like the OCS prep course series that I did with MedBridge, and I had to write that rationale for every single item. And that was so painful and took so much time. And now it would have taken nothing. So yes, that was many hours of my life that I wish I could have back with AI. But so that's one way to do it. And I think as you're going through this, keep in mind, especially the new people here, AI is not going to give you the same thing twice ever. Okay, so if you get something that you like, copy it. Like, well, they're smart enough now that they save it. But if you ask it to create 5 multiple choice questions, it'll create 5 multiple choice questions. Tomorrow, if you go back to AI and say, create 5 multiple choice questions, it's going to give you 5 different questions. They might be similar, but it's designed to not give you the same thing. It's designed to like have some flexibility in the way that it responds and answers. And so that's important to understand, because you could have something that you really like and ask it to iterate a little bit and it might go away. So that's a little bit of a frustrating part of AI, but it also, I think it helps keep the content a little bit fresh. So I'm going to, so that's a great question. Are these AI generated questions discoverable by students? No, they're only in your AI system, so they can't go find them anywhere, right? Whatever you create is just in your AI interface. And so we would never be able to go find those questions that Carly just made. Great question. So what I'm going to show you is a different AI, and I'm going to show you the AI Claude. Okay. And so Claude is from a company called Anthropic, and you can see the interface just looks a little bit different. Claude.ai is where you go. So this is not ChatGPT that Carly was just using. This is Claude. And what I like about Claude, aside from the fact that it's a little bit safer for your data, it handles data quite differently than ChatGPT, is you can do a thing called create a project, which is really fun. So you can train it. You can almost do your own version of a retrieval augmented AI. It's like you're training your own AI. So here on the sidebar, there's this button that says projects. You click the projects and it's going to give you a different interface. It's going to see some of the other projects I made, but we'll want to make a new project. It really doesn't matter what you name it, but we can say like integrative lesson. You can describe it. It doesn't really matter what you're describing it. I don't think it does so much. At least I haven't seen that this impacts it too much, but I'm creating a project. Now that I've created a project, I have a whole different interface. So I have my typical prompt window. So I can just go here and do some things. But I also have this ability to give it instructions and to add files. So I want to add some files. I'm going to upload some files from my device. And what I'm going to upload is some PDFs. So I have a PDF from a lecture about knee osteoarthritis. And I have a PDF about pain and inflammation in pharmacology, and a second information about like opioids specifically in pharmacology. And so you can see that it's adding the files to the thing right now. And as it's doing that, I'm going to go over, I think Carly had a great idea of pre-typing the thing so that you don't have to watch me type with typos. You can see that it's used some of its capacity. So it not endless. So you can't add like a million titles, but you can. So I'm going to add some instructions here. And the instructions I'm going to say is that I want them to read and interpret the files, integrate the content of the files in the responses. The responses should be appropriate for doctor of physical therapy students. So I've given it an instruction on how to use the files that I uploaded to this project. So I've effectively trained this AI session or this project on these lectures that I uploaded, right? And these are just my lecture handouts that I made, so it's easy to get them. Now we're at the phase where we want to do the prompt. So the prompt that I want is I want to say that, I run a lab that's integrative in nature, and I want to develop a synchronous session plan that integrates content from all 3 lectures. I want it to be like really high learning activities. I want it to encourage application, evaluation, and teamwork in a virtual online environment. I'm doing this for a hybrid pathway. So there's my instructions, and let's hit go and see what happens. Claude is going to think for a minute, and you can tell you what it's doing. It's searching the project, right? It's reading the lectures that I gave it. And so this one isn't happening quite as fast as the ChatGPT simple prompt was, right? It's doing some things here. It's trying to connect things. So now it says, hey, good. I reviewed all these lectures that you gave me. Imagine if our brains could review lectures that quickly. And now it's going to build my thing. And so we can slide this over here and start looking and seeing what it made for us. And so it's given us the idea of like what the lectures are that we're integrating. It made some objectives. It told us that it's using the right level of taxonomy that we wanted it to use. It wants the students to make sure it read the lectures before it gets there. And then it starts giving us some great things. So the first thing it's doing is it's giving us some polls, right? So the poll review is great. So it's giving us some questions. I think it's paused for a minute here. It's like thinking a little bit more, but you can see that it's building up this super kind of complex lesson structure that's going to be several segments long that's going through the thing. I'm not sure why it paused so much, probably because it knew I was doing a webinar, but that's kind of the example of creating a project. And I can tell you that I've used this in real life to create extensive integrative things. Yeah. So Claude got sad for a minute. So we can just probably go back and have it try again and it would be okay. So that's the way that I use projects in Claude. You could, of course, go and just do a new chat and use Claude the exact same way that you use ChatGPT, but I thought this project portion of Claude was probably fun to share. All right. So the next thing I'm going to use is Google Gemini. And when I'm using Google Gemini, I'm going to try to do something different altogether. I will say, just as a disclaimer, I pay for Google Gemini, which is not inexpensive. I pay for Claude and I pay for ChatGPT. Those are not the most expensive things ever. But this little thing that says Ultra, Google has a very expensive product. So when you pay for the pro level of the Gemini, you get like no ads in your YouTube and a whole bunch of extra storage and Gmail. So for me, it's sort of like a cost of doing business that I will then later deduct on taxes, but that's the story. What I want to do with Gemini, it's a little bit different. I would like to take Gemini and have it look at a syllabus that I had and see how my learning objectives are doing. What the task in front of us is, I want to look at my learning objectives in a syllabus and see how it does related to CAPD and D standards. So I will upload an old syllabus. And I'm the disclaimer here for all the educators when you see what comes out is this was an old syllabus with not good learning objectives, and that's for a reason. So no judgment here if you see learning objectives you don't love. Whoops, I'm going to put here, and I'm putting in a prompt there, which seems to be not pasting the right way, but it's coming in as an image. Hang on one sec, I'll get this in a different way. If it doesn't type in the right way, I'm going to start typing and then nope, still coming in as an image. All right. So I'm going to type it in here. We're going to have to deal with me typing anyway. And what I'm going to say is that I would like map, whoops, the learning objectives of this document to CAFD 70 standards. And when you're doing these prompts, be as specific as you want to be. You can see I misspelled objectives. It's okay. It's smart enough to know that. The output should be in a table. So I want the output to be in a table format. The output should clearly indicate which the standard number learning objective relates to. And then I'm going to say, don't make assumptions, make sure they are connected, because I don't want it to give me some mapping that's over optimistic. So we'll request some things here, Google searching, and it's going to look through. So it is smart here, right? So The table below maps these learning objectives to the 7D practice expectations. It might change with the updated standards. So it's smart enough to know that the standards have changed, right? It immediately knows that. I didn't have to tell it that, which is fantastic. So here it's looking at this, and there it is, right? There's some of the standards that these things are moving toward. So right away, I've mapped all my learning objectives to 7D standards. I could go a little bit further than that, and I could say this course is for orthopathology, suggest improved learning objectives based on the new CAPD 7D standards and best practices for writing objectives, and give it another go. And it's going to take it through and teach me some improved learning objectives. So what's great is it has the current objective, the improved objective, and what ND alignment it has. And so now is the time where my expertise checks in and starts digging through this and deciding how to use this, how to change it, what verbs to use, how to move it. So, this is really nice. You could export it to sheets, and it's going through all the things I had in my syllabus. So you can just see right there a glimpse into the power that you can do when you're using these AI tools. All right. So I think we're getting to where I'd like to move into our question and answer. So, I think let's go to that next. We'll just go back. I'll share my screen again to this other thing. I see some questions in here. So we'll keep this on the screen. This is easy enough as we answer some questions. So I see Molly came in there with a question. The paid Gemini product is better at providing curriculum mapping than paid ChatGPT. It could be the prompts. It could be that they inherently have different capabilities. I think Google seamlessly integrates current web searches. So it can go and do a web search really quickly. I feel like sometimes for certain things, it's smarter. So if I'm doing a task like I just showed you, the Gemini is going to be probably my default AI to go to. If I want to have like ongoing conversations, or I need to talk to ChatGPT about my fish, it's easier for me to go to ChatGPT, and I use it for that. If I'm doing projects and integrating documents, I'm in Claude using their projects a lot. So I start to, have affinity to one AI or another over time. Carly, how do you change the AIs that you're using?
Yes, I do a little bit, although I will say I don't have the paid Gemini, although my husband does. So I will sometimes be like, hey, can you look this up for me on Gemini? Because I'm not getting what I want on ChatGPT. And I will say I haven't done this yet, but ChatGPT does have projects that I wonder if something like that, where you are establishing like these are the documents and these are the ground rules for what I want you to do. I wonder if something like that, like project in either ChatGPT or Claude, where you're saying, here, I've uploaded all of the CAPTs, here are all the 7Ds, and like these are the things I want you to pull from. I wonder if that might go better. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So making a prompt a research question using Elicit, right? So yeah, that's really nice. That's a different AI. So there's a lot of AIs that are out there, and Elicit would be something that was like an AI based off of a larger large language model that it just modifies its interface so that it interacts with you in a certain way. It kind of adds in some behind the scenes prompting to get kind of the thing that you want to get. So, I think there's ways to use different AIs to do different things. And there's also ways to use the base AIs and just have different prompting strategies that give it a little bit more power. So, as we're going here, if you have more questions, throw them in the chat. But, as we're looking forward, we're going to be talking about ethics, because I think bias, academic integrity. I think you talk academic integrity for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's really like made some things like application essays kind of weird to have anymore. Data privacy, student transparency, and also academic transparency. Like, when did you use AI to create something? And yes, we totally used AI to help create our presentation today. And, we probably consumed several cases of water doing it and a lot of energy, but, kind of worth it a little bit. Everything's worth teaching, right? So stay tuned, because we have a whole presentation on the ethics. I think our core message here is start exploring, experimenting with these things. Type in a prompt, see what you get, start to learn, trust your instincts as an educator. keep iterating your prompts. Don't expect you to get anything good the way you did it. So I think probably Carly and I made it even look a little bit more polished. I would say I did 5 iterations of that first of that mapping thing that I did. I did 5 iterations to come up with that prompt that I just typed in now. So, I did it in one step here, but previously before this, I did 5 iterations. Share what you're doing and, keep learning with us. We're pretty excited about BrainSmith. We're going to be doing a lot of learning like this. We're going to offer a larger faculty development series beyond AI soon. We're going to be offering some other clinical-based certificates. So this is our first webinar, which is really great. And just kind of privately, this was the first time Carly and I have ever presented together, even though we've been working for maybe 6 or 7 years together, which is really cool. So there are some additional learning opportunities upcoming, which I want to talk about. I am part of some cool groups doing some presentations. So upcoming at the ELC conference, we're doing leveraging AI in PT education, specific for hybrid educators. That's a group with Megan Flores, Tom Longbottom, Teresa Bachman, and myself. And we're also doing that same group a presentation at CSM, which is more like a show and tell. And there's going to be some kind of group workshops in that presentation, which is also an on-demand session, which will be pretty cool. And then next year at some point, the Academy of Leadership and Innovation has collected a lot of the AI talk proposals that they had that didn't make it into CSM and grouped them together into a webinar series that they're planning. And so in that one, it's going to be a specific dive into ethics and the environmental justice lens and adapting PT practice and AI together. Some upcoming learning opportunities there. And then kind of the preview of our faculty development series. This is part 1. We have part 7. So we're going to go through revolutionizing content. We're going to eventually get to research and scholarship and student literacy. And I think if you hang out with us throughout this whole process, you'll end up with, I think, a pretty good competency in how AI works and how it's going. So, we would love to have you with us. We love that you joined us for our inaugural thing. We are offering the next webinar already is already planned, and it's going to be the Wednesday after ELC conference. So if that interests you, you can follow that link there. And then the other thing about that is if you go there, you'll notice that that's probably something that we're charging some money for, because that's ultimately, I think, where we need to go. But because you're all awesome, we are going to include a code to give you some discount there. So if you use the code first webinar, you can get a discount in that product for being cool people that hung out with us in our first webinar. So Carly, what do you have to say?
Thank you to folks who joined us tonight, and for folks who are viewing the recording in the future. Also, thank you. And I'm dropping in the chat now, since that we are, I think we are not new educators, but our audience is shifting a little. Right now, we're focusing a little bit more on you as health science educators. So we would love some feedback. If you wouldn't mind, simple Google form. Love feedback here. So I'm just going to share this with you. And if you have the time, it's super short. I really appreciate just to see, how did we do? What could we do differently? And is there anything else that you want to see in the future from us? So thank you so much. And reach out with any questions.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you spending your time with us, and have a great evening.
Everyone, thank you.